That's great.
Okay, Mr. Early, you want to, whenever you're ready to get started?
Yes, I think we're ready. I think you could go ahead and call the meeting to order first, and then I'll jump in.
Thank you very much. At this time, we will call to order the General Plan Advisory Committee of April 6, 2021. Go ahead, Mr. Early.
All right. Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. I'm going to start by sharing my screen so that everyone sees all the same things. It's always a little bit cumbersome to do that. Um, okay, I believe you should now see an agenda. Do you all see that?
Yes, we do.
Yes, great. All right. So this evening's meeting is the part 3 of the GPAC's process to do an overview and provide guidance regarding policy issues to occur in Hollister's general plan. This is the third of 5 meetings in a row that talk about these subjects. And I'll just start by introducing the folks who are here this evening. I think you all at this point know each other. The 7 members of the GPAC are here. We have staff from the city of Hollister attending as well. Carrie Stone and Angelica from my office are here. And I do want to mention that in the audience also is Todd Bressie, who's from our general plan team. And he is, as you may know, our arts and cultural consultant. He'll be presenting and helping to run the meeting next week and is here tonight as an observer, just so he can see the GPAC at work. So welcome, Todd. I don't know that we can see you or how you see us, but because you're in a different part of the room, but Todd is here this evening. Tonight's meeting is pretty straightforward. We're going to be focusing in on some key policy options that you see listed in the middle of this slide. We're looking at growth management, at special planning areas. The growth management talks also about sphere of influence changes, and we're looking at residential land use designations. Once we have some other preliminary items, I'll be giving a report on all of those. We'll take questions from the GPAC, we'll have public comment, and then we'll have your discussion and giving us guidance on each of the items. This third meeting, I hope, follows the precedent of the other 2, which is that we were able to finish quite punctually at 8:30 tonight. This agenda is actually in certain ways a little shorter than previous agendas have been, but the subjects are also perhaps more complex. And so I'm hoping that the shortness and the complexity offset each other, and that will be done again tonight right around 8:30. We do have an audience this evening as well, and you can see those on the bar of notes. And there are 6 attendees, well, 5 others than Todd Bressie, and we will have a time for those folks to speak as well. We'll actually have 2 different times. The first of those in just a few moments for items not on the agenda. And then I really want to underscore this because I think there might have been confusion last time. There will be 1 period for public comment for all the items that are on the agenda after my presentation. Actually, I felt bad last time because after the comment period was over, I got a message in the chat saying, when will we be able to give public comment on this item? And in fact, the public comment had already passed. And I'm sorry about that from last time. I really therefore want to underscore the 1 public comment session after my presentation this evening. So before those are just some overview items. I do want to just mention a little bit about the meeting. The meeting is being recorded on YouTube, and it's being live cast and then will be available to be viewed later as well. We will in just a moment do a roll call, and I'll finish up this brief overview. As I mentioned, we have just 2 public comment periods, 1 for items not on the agenda and 1 for all the agenda items together. We will enforce a 3-minute time limit for each speaker. And if you are interested in looking at and signing up, I think everyone has signed up. You do that through the Zoom webinar. This webinar is available tonight for people to log on. The GPAC tonight is limited to commenting and discussing only on items that are on the agenda. So if items not on the agenda are brought up, GPAC members may direct that they be added to a future agenda, but they cannot comment on them this evening. So with that, let's just take a quick roll call of the members who are here. I believe we have at least 6 of the 7 members here this evening. First, Mayor Velazquez.
Here.
Councilmember Resendez. And perhaps your microphone is off. I know you're here.
Present.
There we go. Planning Commissioner Huboy.
Present.
Planning Commissioner Stevens.
Present.
Member Johnson.
Present.
Who am I missing? I'm sorry. Member Rebecki.
Here.
And I believe Member Evans is not here yet. Is that correct? I think so. So we have 6 of the 7 here today, and I'll try and note if we do see Member Evans come in this evening as well. All right, so from there, let's go on. We do have now a comment period for the public for any items that are not on tonight's agenda. So if any of you in the audience would like to speak on an item not on the agenda, please raise your hand and we'll take comments. I see one right now from Rob Rodriguez, and then we'll see if there are any others. Can someone unmute Mr. Rodriguez so that he can speak?
Can you hear me?
Mr. Rodriguez, go ahead. Yes, I think we can hear you.
Okay. Thanks. Not on the agenda. I just think what could be added is public or community outreach. Again, looking through the Facebook right now, I have it open. The general plan update one. The last time they made a post was March 26th. That was before the last meeting, and all it said was join us for the meeting. It wasn't any information about the meeting. The Instagram, same kind of deal. There was a post made today, but again, it just says join us at the meeting. Here's what we're going to talk about, but it doesn't show, it would be helpful to have the diagrams and whatnot posted so that people could, we could share it and get more community opinion. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Any other items from the audience on items not on the agenda? Valerie Eglund. We could unmute Valerie.
Thank you. I just unmuted. I wanted to comment on the robust issues of around parks that have been addressed and I believe will continue to be addressed, and for the general plan. And I look forward to the presentation about arts this evening. Our arts and culture are very, very important. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Just for the record and for clarity, parks have already been discussed. They were discussed 2 weeks ago, and we got a lot of good input and direction from the GPAC then. Arts will not be discussed tonight, but will be discussed at next week's meeting. So I just wanted to make sure Ms. Eglund and other members of the audience understood the order of things. But we have covered parks, and we definitely will be covering arts and culture next week. Can someone lower hands for both Rob Rodriguez and Valerie Eglund? And let me ask if there is anyone else in the audience who would like to speak on an item not on the agenda. All right, hearing none, we will go on. And our next item is just a little review about the process before I go into tonight's issues. We are taking feedback that's come from the public, both through community workshops and an online survey. We had 2 very successful workshops on March 9th and 10th, where members of the workshop audience got to go through issues of prime importance to them and provide feedback. We have also had an online survey open since March 5th, and it will be open through at least April 16th for people to provide input that way. And we have provided a summary memo to the GPAC and members of the public that's available on our website of all of the input on tonight's options that we did receive both at those 2 workshops and in the online survey. As I already mentioned, we're in the middle now of 5 GPAC meetings. We had meetings on other planning topics on March 23rd and 30th, both a week ago and 2 weeks ago. We're having tonight the 3rd of these 5 meetings to talk about the issues I already mentioned in terms of growth management, special planning areas, and housing. And then we'll transition next week to a meeting about arts and culture. We take 1 week off on Tuesday, April 20th. And then the last of these meetings is Tuesday, April 27th, at which we'll be talking about climate change, sustainability, and hazards planning. All of the guidance from the GPAC will be summarized in a memo from PlaceWorks, which will come before the Planning Commission in late May, and then to the City Council in late June. And then after that, we'll use all the information that comes out of this process to begin preparing the general plan itself. As I already mentioned, the topics that we've been covering, topics 1 through 19, were covered at our previous 2 meetings. So we did about 9 or 10 items at each of those meetings. Tonight we have only 3 topics, but they are much more complicated topics. And so there's quite a bit of material about each of them. And as it says here, we'll be doing number 20, growth management, number 21, special planning areas, and number 21, residential land use designations. Next week, we'll be talking about arts and culture. And then on April 27th, we'll be talking about climate change, sustainability, and natural hazards. So with that, I'm going to just launch into the meeting topics tonight, and I'm going to start with growth management. One of the big issues under growth management is what's called the sphere of influence, which is abbreviated on this slide as SOI, sphere of influence. And what we found through our studies is that almost all of the remaining vacant land within the city limits and the sphere of influence is currently designated for high density residential and mixed use projects. There's very little land still within the city limits and sphere that's designated for the type of lower density single family residential development that the city has come to see as its most prevalent development type. And in fact, about 80% of new development and all development in Hollister is single family homes as opposed to multifamily development types. We have also, so that on the one hand is that land supply, which is quite limited for single family. There's actually quite a large land supply for higher density residential and mixed use development. That's the supply of land. On the other hand of that equation is the demand. And we've done a number of projections to try and understand what likely development demand will be. We've done one estimate, which we call the baseline, which is based on estimates by the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments, or AMBAG, who's the regional planning body. And that baseline projection shows about 2,000 new housing units over the 20-year life of the general plan. There is enough capacity to accommodate that development in the form of multifamily and higher density residential units. If you wanted those 2,000 units to be developed as single family homes, you would need to either redesignate and probably designate additional lands because you have very little land left for single family homes. So that's the baseline development scenario. We also have a moderate development scenario and a robust at about 4,800 and 6,800 units respectively. And under the moderate development scenario, you probably need up to about 220 acres of additional land in your sphere to accommodate that development, perhaps even more, depending on how many single family homes you want. And under the robust scenario at 6,800 units, there's definitely a need for additional land up to as much as 636 acres to allow for single family development of the types of similar to the types that the city sees today. So with those numbers in play, which is a very wide range, obviously, anywhere from 0 additional land all the way up to 636 acres, we've tried to put together some scenarios of possible changes to the sphere of influence boundary. And those are shown in these maps, which were published as part of our document. So the first of these options is to make no change to the existing sphere of influence. And you see the sphere in this orange dashed line, which I'm pointing to with my cursor. You could leave that sphere just as it is. There'd still be quite a bit of land inside the sphere and most of it inside the city limits that is available for multifamily development and for higher densities of housing and mixed use development. But there would really be virtually 0 land available within the city limits and within the sphere for new single family residential development. So that's the first option of no change. We've also looked at a series of additional possibilities to accommodate additional development in various scenarios. So for example, option 2 creates just enough additional land at a higher density, against higher density multifamily units, just 69 acres at the very southern edge of the city to accommodate additional multifamily development only to close the gap on the robust growth scenario. Obviously, these could also be single family units instead, but that would be a relatively small amount of land with a not very substantial amount of additional development capacity. Option 3 is roughly 220 acres to accommodate the moderate growth scenario. We've shown that also in the south side of the city along Union Road, a larger area of 220 acres. This would be enough land to add some single family capacity, still assuming that the existing lands within the existing sphere would be developed at a moderate and higher density, and this would be enough to accommodate the moderate growth scenario. Option 4 looks at development expansions of the sphere on both the north side of the city, along Buena Vista Road in that corridor, as well as the Union Road corridor. And that's enough land to accommodate all of the development we think might be necessary for the robust growth scenario, all those 4,800 additional units. And then we have another option, which is to expand the sphere into all areas where the county general plan already anticipates urban development. You'll note that that's a much larger area. It actually does not include the Buena Vista area that's up here, which has been part of the city's general plan in the past, at least for study. It instead includes the same Union Road area, as well as the east and northeast sides of the city, and a little bit on the far west side. These are the areas that the county general plan currently foresees for urban development. And these were the options that we previously published. Since the time that we published those options, it came to our attention that the LAFCO, the Local Agency Formation Commission, was separately looking at a different possible sphere expansion for the city of Hollister. And so we wanted to show you that one as well. It's strictly in the southern portion of the city, near Union Road, but you can see it doesn't include all of Union Road, which runs east-west here, and instead is both sides of South Side Road, going all the way down essentially to the edge of the Ridgemark subdivision. This would be an amount of land similar to what we showed in the Union Road area, but in a different configuration. And it would certainly be possible to combine these two scenarios and to make one larger scenario along all of Union Road as well as South Side Road. So this is a new option for you to look at tonight based on that study that LAFCO was undertaking. So those are the 6 options we have for your sphere of influence. The other important issue for growth management is the question of wastewater service. As I think most of you know, the city of Hollister is the wastewater treatment provider to both the city and all of the surrounding region, some portions of the development that are happening under county auspices, and most of the Sunny Slope Water District as well. And you see the Sunny Slope Water District shown here in yellow. The city has historically provided sewer service on request from developers within this larger area, particularly mostly inside of the red area, which is called the Hollister Urban Service Area or Hollister Urban Area, but even sometimes outside of that HUA, water sewer service has been provided. And we've discovered that that's not strictly in compliance with state law. Under state law, the city is actually only supposed to provide sewer service primarily inside its sphere of influence, which is currently the yellow dashed line or orange dashed line here. The city should provide that service only inside the sphere and only if the city anticipates future annexation in the relatively near future. The city is not supposed to provide sewer service outside of that line of the sphere of influence, except to address an immediate or pending health and safety threat. And that really has not been the case in the past. A new development, which isn't even built yet, does not constitute an immediate or pending health and safety threat. And so probably under the law, the city should not have been providing that service to date. So one way to remedy this situation would be, if we go back a little bit, to look at this larger sphere expansion. If the city were to expand its sphere into this area or an even larger area, then the lands would be inside of the sphere, could even come down into this area inside the red Hollister urban area down in this area. And then the provision of sewer service in that area would be legal under state law because it would be in the sphere, and the city might anticipate future development in those areas and future annexation. Absent that, again, the city is not supposed to be providing sewer service outside of its immediate sphere. There are two existing memorandums of understanding that involve not only the city, but the County of San Benito, the San Benito County Water District, and the Sunny Slope Water District. Those MOUs seem to suggest that the city does agree to provide that sewer service. But again, those MOUs appear to be in violation of state law, which precludes the provision, particularly outside of the sphere boundary. So we have several wastewater policies for you to consider for the general plan. Whether you would like to provide wastewater, you would like to have a policy following state law regarding wastewater treatment service for lands inside the sphere, whether you would like to include in the general plan a policy to only provide outside the sphere in the face of public threats, or if you think that no additional policies are needed. We also are wondering if you would like to state a general plan policy about the existing memorandum of understanding, making no changes to it, trying to change it to be consistent with the government code, leaving the MOU after adoption of the general plan update, or leaving the MOU as soon as possible. The MOU does allow the city to exit the MOU just really upon notice. And so you could decide to leave that MOU in light of the government code issues. There is also a question in your policy document about the wastewater treatment plant joint operation. It is the case now that the wastewater treatment plant is serving not only the city of Hollister, but significant portions of the unincorporated county. And I believe the city council members at least are aware that the city of San Juan Bautista has actually requested that the city consider providing wastewater treatment services to San Juan Bautista as well. With those things in mind, both county interest and San Juan Bautista interest, there have been suggestions that perhaps the wastewater treatment plant could be jointly operated by some entity that would include not only the city, but also representatives from the county and from the city of San Juan Bautista. And so we're looking here at whether you would like to see that policy in the general plan as well. It might be that you say, no, we want to continue to operate the wastewater treatment plant, particularly with the notion that we are going to limit future urban development in the county. You might decide you want to maintain operation, not create a joint operation, but also expanding the SOI so that you could provide service to those unincorporated county areas. You could also decide that you do want to see joint operation, but only if you can ensure that the city has a controlling interest in the water plant, or you might say that you do want to create a new entity that's under joint control of either the public or all the entities. The city would turn the wastewater treatment plant over to that entity. It would be responsible, obviously, for the financing as well as the operation of the plant. So this is an important policy question, both in terms of wastewater treatment and also in terms of the city's control over future development, both inside the city and in the unincorporated county. So that concludes the items about wastewater treatment. We're going to go on now to look at special planning areas. And there are 3 of these, and the city's request for proposals for the general plan update that we're now completing at PlaceWorks identified these 3 special planning areas. I believe they were vetted to the city council before the request for proposals was issued. And you see them on this map in bright blue here, in green, and in purple. So we have the Buena Vista corridor, which we've expanded to include not only this Buena Vista corridor, but what's called the North Gateway overlay area, which is the pink area here. So we've got this whole area. We've got the green Meridian Road extension area, and we have the Union Road corridor. And we're going to explore with you tonight what future land uses should be in those areas, get your guidance on those, and then use those to change the land use designations in the general plan for each of these 3 areas. So the first of these is the Buena Vista area and North Gateway. What we call option 1, and these are just numbered for convenience. Option 1 is to leave the general plan designations just as they are today. And you'll see that those designations include quite a bit of low density residential on the south side of Buena Vista Road, and ongoing agricultural use on the north side of Buena Vista. And then in the North Gateway area, quite a bit of commercial activity, which is shown in the pink color here, and some higher densities of residential use inside the sphere of influence and going up along the railroad tracks as well. So That's one option, is to keep those land use designations as they are. Another option is to actually take a step back and make more of the area agricultural, mimicking really what's there today. So areas inside the city's current limits and sphere would be maintained with the medium density residential designation that they have, but the remainder of this area would be redesignated to match the agricultural uses that are there today along Buena Vista and along Wright Road. We would also see some additional housing capability in this area, as well as additional commercial designations along the Highway 25 corridor and a little portion of the railroad corridor. The remaining options, option 3, is very similar to option 2 in its land uses, but does include additional roadways and a linear parkway to create a buffer between the residential development and the agricultural lands, with some additional residential development in this northern area as well, up to Wright Road. And as I mentioned, a new east-west street connecting all the way out to Highway 156, as well as new north-south streets that would connect into the rest of the town. However, the northern part of the area would still be designated for agriculture, and you'd have various residential and commercial uses along the Highway 25 corridor. And option 4 has even more development in it. And this is more in keeping with the idea that we would be developing all the way up to Wright Road. You see low density residential of the types that have been developed in the city of Hollister historically in other parts of the city, going all the way up to Wright Road. There would be a new linear park and bikeway to create a buffer along Wright Road, so that might create an edge for future urban development. But all of the area in here would be redesignated for low density residential, with a new east-west street going out to 156 and new north-south streets connecting from Wright Road all the way down to the existing city. So those are some options for the Buena Vista area. We have a 5th one, which again is urban development in all of this area, but at higher densities to allow more development capacity with high density residential closest to the city and medium density residential of the sort that's already been developed in the new subdivision here that would go all the way up to Wright Road. So those are the options for the Buena Vista area. Let's go on to the Meridian area. The Meridian area is a little more straightforward. It's a portion in the northeast corner of town near Santa Ana and Fairview, where Meridian Street comes through and is discontinuous. Meridian Street, as I'm sure you all know, ends at the beginning of this area coming from the built-up part of town. There's a small piece of Meridian that's out near Fairview, but they do not connect for, I believe it's something like a half a mile that runs through this area within the sphere, but outside of current development. So we've got a couple of options here to leave this general plan just as it is, or to keep the land use designations that they are, but to put new streets through, both connecting Prater from Santa Ana down to Hillcrest, and also putting Meridian through, but leaving the land use designations as they are with low density residential and some residential estate. These stay as they are in the current general plan with the mixed use node at the corner of Fairview and Hillcrest. Then we have an option to actually lessen some of the development potential to maintain the rural residential estate feeling that's in this area now. We would keep those areas that have already been developed with their low density residential designation, but larger undeveloped parcels would be redesignated back to residential estate so that neighbors in that area could maintain the quality of life that they have today. And then another option, those are all the options for that area. And then the last item we have is the Union Road area. This, of course, is on the south side of the city. It includes the existing school, both sides of Union Road, and a portion of South Side Road. The existing general plan does not have designations for the area south of Union Road. It does show low density residential on the north side of Union Road and on the east side of South Side Road, with a mixed use node somewhere along Highway 25 near the junction with Union Road, and that's this half circle here. So one option, option 1, is to leave that exactly the way it is today. And option 2 is to actually not develop this land for urbanized uses, and instead, obviously, to keep the school where it is, but otherwise to redesignate this entire area for agriculture to keep its uses in agriculture as they are today. We also have a possibility of keeping the low density residential development designation as it is in the general plan today, and redesignating the south side of Union Road for agriculture to maintain what's there today as well. And option 3 has both with this mixed use node as well as the same option without the mixed use node. We then go on to an option 4, which takes into account some of the existing development proposals and expands the sphere and foresees development in a slightly larger area, partially south of Union Road and a little bit west of Southside Road, keeping the rest of the area in agricultural use with the mixed use node in option 4A and without the mixed use node in option 4B. And then we have an option to take the entire study area and turn it into an additional area of low density residential development. This entire study area would get the buff color indicating the low density residential development. And there would also in option 5A be the mixed use node. And in option 5B, we would not have that mixed use node. These alternatives with urban development on the southern area would also extend Ladd Road and then around to create a connection all the way out to South Side on Enterprise Street. So you would have more of a through street pattern in this area, since you'd be seeing new residential development in the southwestern area as well. And then finally, we have an option 6, which foresees the entire area being developed and with some higher densities, both medium density and high density residential development as you get closer to Highway 25. These are with the mixed use node in option 6 as well. So that's another option for this area. All right, and let me point out before I go on that you did receive several comment letters from representatives of property owners in both the Buena Vista area and particularly the Union Road area. And all of those were landowners who would like to see development in the future and requested that you choose some of the development, some of the planning options that would allow for development on their properties. I want to transition now and go to the last of our subjects tonight, which are residential land use designations. We want to talk with you about high density residential as an important use within the city. You do have, as I already mentioned, an existing high density residential designation that allows 12 to 35 dwelling units per acre. Very little of that land has been developed in the past. There's probably a limited market for apartments, at least as perceived by the development community in Hollister. And so you haven't seen much development in those areas. However, in addition to that, there is kind of a wrinkle in state law about this. The state would like you in your housing element to show housing sites that have at least 20 dwelling units per acre required on them. And this is in order to be able to prove that you have enough land to fulfill your need for very low and low income housing. You're going to probably need to designate land for about 1,300 such units in your new housing element. You don't have those numbers yet officially, but that's likely to be the range. And because of that, we think you need about 65 acres of land to meet that future housing allocation at a minimum density of 20 dwelling units per acre. The state, unfortunately, won't accept 12 to 35, as is your current general plan, because the state will assume that the new development might be built at the low end of that allowed range, and then they won't count them as sufficient to cover your needed very low and low income. So we are recommending to you that you ask us to add a designation that's for 20 to 35 and a separate designation for 12 to 20. And again, we think you need about 65 acres for of that 20 dwelling unit minimum land. We have put together a map of where we think that might occur. Those areas are shown in the pink, particularly in the Gateway area, and a few other sites of existing high density residential in other parts of town. I can report, and this is reflected in the memo that you've received, that we had a number of comments from members of the public, particularly at our workshops, where they suggested that maybe instead of they supported the overall concept of this higher density residential, but they supported it being in other parts of the city as well, not so much focused in the Gateway commercial area along Highway 25, but perhaps also on the far west side of town, out near Highway 156 and where some of the commercial development in that area is as well as perhaps looking for some areas in the south or other parts of town. So as you look at that, you might want to consider those comments as well. The other item to be discussed tonight is a pretty complicated, down in the weeds kind of issue about net versus gross density. Your current general plan has been interpreted to be relying on net density, which is to say, if you say you're going to build, say, 10 units per acre, it's only considering those portions of the land that are actually developed with residential. So if you have a large parcel that's, say, 100 acres, the first thing you have to do is build roads on it. And so you take those roads away, you could actually lose about 30% of the site to roads and parks and other things. So then you only have 70 acres left. So if you, just to use a round number, if you were allowing 10 units per acre, if you start with 100 acres, you might allow 1,000, you might have estimated 1,000 units there. Once you cut it down to 70 acres, you're only going to get 700 units. And so what's happened is that the resulting amount of development that was foreseen in the general plan has actually been less than what was expected in general plan calculations. So we are recommending at this time that you consider moving away from those net density calculations to use gross density instead, and to either assume you're using that gross density and also lowering the density ranges so that you continue to get the development that's already being built, or that you go to gross density and understand that without changing the densities, you'll actually start getting some higher densities than you have today. And I'll just go back a couple of slides if I can and show you an example of that. If we look at, I'm sorry to be going through all these slides. If we look at this subdivision here, which is a relatively recent subdivision in the city on the north side of town, this did come in the medium density residential, which the general plan anticipates will be townhouses. But because of the densities allowed here and using net instead of gross density, it was instead developed with a series of single family homes. And so these really are kind of important distinctions to make. If you stick with net density, your medium density residential ends up being a single family product on small single family lots. If you go to gross density and keep the densities as they are, you'll probably be moving towards townhouses instead of the small lot single family. And the same thing is true with your higher density residential. Right now, it could be developed in a way of using the net density that you'll get townhouses. If your intent is to see apartments there, it would make sense to go from net density back to gross density. I'm going to go forward now to the rest of the presentation. So we've talked about this issue of net density versus gross density, and that's the end of the presentation and the end of the items that we'll be talking about this evening. I'm going to now open it up for questions from the GPAC, and then we will take comments from the public in what will be tonight's only public comment period, and then we'll get into GPAC comments on and guidance on each of these issues. So any questions?
Yeah, this Larry, I have a question for the mayor. And Mayor Velasquez, I know it's pending, the incorporating San Juan Bautista into our wastewater system, but I also understood that perhaps they would tap into our water system. So I need some clarification.
That might be a question better answered by staff, actually. I don't know, Abraham, can you talk about the status of those talks with San Juan Bautista about sewer and water both?
Hi, David, thank you. I know that I've heard about the wastewater connection. I know there was a presentation given to the city council not too long ago. That's when you, David, provided the update to the GPAC to the city council. Regarding water,
I can answer pretty well. I've been involved with
Okay, go
it
ahead.
for quite a bit. So San Juan Bautista has had several issues with their water and sewer with state fines. They've asked the city if they could use our sewer facility for that portion of it. We looked at this as San Juan Bautista being a city, incorporated city, so we felt it would be fine. To work with a partner such as a city, not to just expand it out to any area, but to a recognized city incorporated. So we are speaking with San Juan Bautista about allowing the use of our or wastewater system. The water system itself, that is a partnership between Sunny Slope Water, San Benito Water, and the city, a facility that was built called the West Hills facility. And what San Juan Bautista is going to do is be part of that partnership. So a line will be brought from that facility off of Union Road area to San Juan Bautista to give them the water that meets the state standards. San Juan Bautista will be buying in to that partnership to make that happen.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Other questions?
David, I had a question regarding the open areas that you showed on those planned areas that run along like Buena Vista Road, Wright Road, Union Road. Those green areas, you mentioned they would be for ag. Would it be specifically for ag, or could it be used for parkland?
Well, parks, by sort of the definition of the word, are publicly owned properties. It is not legal to designate private land for public ownership. You have to buy it first. So you have to allow an economic use to the property for the private owner who owns it. Now, the city or the county can, through negotiation, or actually through the use of eminent domain for a bona fide public use, a city or a county can purchase property and at fair market value, a negotiated price, and then turn it into a park or into another public use. But you can only designate land to be a park after it's been owned and after it's been bought by that public entity. So you could buy land that's designated agriculture for a park. You could also buy land that's designated residential for a park. If it's designated residential and developed, you can also what's called exact a part of that land as a condition of approval of the development, and it can become parkland as well. But the owner, the private owner of the property, has to either sell it or voluntarily dedicate it to the city as part of a development proposal before you can put a park designation on it. So short answer to your question is yes, those agricultural lands could be parks, but it would only be after they were purchased to become parkland by a government entity. Any other questions?
I do have a few questions, Mr. Early, if there's no other questions from the other members.
Go ahead.
I wanted to go back to the baseline conversation and the number of units that we have, and as far as meeting the state requirements. If we talk about the baseline requirements, the issue is your thoughts were we would not be meeting the requirements without adding 67 acres, I believe it was.
Well, I think I want to make sure we're not confusing two things. There's really not a state requirement about these scenarios that I put on the slide here. And I think those are the ones you're talking about since you're using the word baseline. Is that right? So let me just clarify these numbers that you see, 2038, 4854, 6854. These are all numbers that come from projections that were done combined by PlaceWorks and BAE Urban Economics, who I think you've met some of those staff members who are our economists on the project. And these are our estimates of demand based on information that we have today about the residential trends. And just to give a little more background, baseline is a set of numbers that come from AMBAG, the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments. They have done projections that they have based, as we understand it at least, on trends over roughly the last 20 years. And under that trend, they project about 2,000 new units needing to be constructed in the city of Hollister. I think we all know, maybe AMBAG doesn't totally understand this about Hollister, that 20 years has had a lot of pretty exceptional circumstances in Hollister when we compare it to what's happening today. And two major things were that you all had, I'm not remembering if it was wastewater or water moratorium through the early 2000s, which pretty much precluded development altogether. And then just as that moratorium ended, we had the Great Recession starting in 2008, and development really stalled altogether. So for most of the past 20 years, you've had artificially low development because of both the moratorium and then the recession. So we believe that if the market is left to its own devices, it will build more than those 2,000 units that AMBAG projected. And we believe that the number in greater Hollister, including both the city and if the city doesn't approve the units, but the county does, in the county, we believe that if you look at the last 8 or so years, you'll get about 4,800 units. And if you look just at the last 1 or 2 years, when growth has been very, very robust, and if that rate continued of 20 years, you would get 6,800 units. Those are all quite high numbers. They're not related to the state mandate. The state mandate is likely to be on the order of maybe 1,000 to 2,000 units of capacity. You actually have that in your general plan today. And we don't know that mandate yet because the Regional Housing Needs Assignment has not been made by AMBAG, but we believe it will be in a 1,000 to 2,000 kind of range, and you will be able to meet that probably even just looking at your current general plan, but they will all be units that are higher density units. And so one of the questions you need to answer is whether you want to plan more land outside the current sphere to accommodate single family homes. And that's really what all of these maps do, is looking here at additional areas to accommodate single family homes in the buff colors. And then in addition to that, much later in the presentation is a question of designating a smaller amount of land inside city limits on those pink sites I showed, and I'll move forward to them in a couple minutes, but they're intended only to meet the state mandate for higher density, low and very low income units. But there's two separate questions. The first part with those estimates on baseline is not a state mandate. That's just our estimate. The state mandate is probably for about 65 acres of land that can be 20 units per acre or more.
Thank you for that clarification. And that's really where I was going to. I think it's important we start moving to more of a higher density. We've had so much single family growth, but a lot of that has been taken from more people living outside the community, and those within the community have not had a place to go. So the portion of the higher density in the downtown core, I believe, is up to 100 units or something I saw somewhere.
That's right. Yes.
I think that it's going to be an important part for our future downtown. And I want to make sure we're working rather than spreading out, but kind of bringing in the density so we have more. We talked about the idea of projects that have, as you remember, this some single family and then multifamily units within. So I think that's going to be really important because we can just keep spreading out, but a lot of this land that was talked about tonight is prime ag land, and I think it's going to be important for us to really think about our future. The other question I had for you, there was some
Mr. Mayor, before you go on, could I just, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you reminded me that I forgot to mention two other policy issues you'll be looking at tonight, and you just alluded to one of them. So if I could just quickly say, please. We are also asking, we're pointing out that your existing high end of high density at 35 units per acre is actually not that high anymore today. Many communities are building 60, 70, 100 units per acre. Some communities have no cap at all in their downtowns and other places. So we're suggesting that you, in your high density zones, that you go up from 35 to 65 as the cap, and that in the downtown, that you go either to 125 dwelling units per acre, or that you even just say there's no cap on density in the downtown. And I'm sorry, I forgot to mention those on this slide when I went through before.
And thank you. I read that earlier, so thank you for going back to it. And that's why I thought it was very important that we start creating the density rather than more spreading out throughout the community in the prime ag line. There was a few properties on the south end of the city that was talked about off of Union Road that is showing, there you go, showing some mixed use and some residential. In these conversations, could we talk about being more retail, commercial, light industrial in that area rather than just more residential? Because I think the problem we've had in our community is the commercial industrial is really on the northern part of the city, and there's very little in the southern part of the city. So that means somebody living in the southern part of the city has to drive all the way to the northern part of the city if they had a job here locally. But maybe this way, we start to balance our city. Instead of just everything being in one place, we have some availability of commercial in the southern part of the city, western, eastern, well-rounded, and that will help our traffic flow, because this area here in the southern part of the city is very impacted with traffic. Union Road is a $80+ million project to widen, and there's no funds for it. So all these areas are going to be important to, rather than just adding more homes to it, adding more jobs to it. In other words, more of the commercial
Right.
part.
Yeah, let me take that as a question and say a couple things about that. You can certainly direct us to do that. And especially on either commercial or mixed use in this node, as already shown in your general plan, at the intersection of Highway 25 with Union Road. Something like that would make a lot of sense for neighborhood or even regional commercial or retail uses. When you get into industrial or office uses, I would caution two related things. One is that your land supply on the north side of town is very, very large already. And it's difficult, based on the calculations we've done in our estimates, it's going to be many, many years, 10, 20, 30, 50 years before that northern area is built out. And many land use economists would say you don't want to be competing with yourself by creating a second area that you're also trying to develop when you already have such a big land supply. And the second point is that I would imagine that the reason that that industrial park was put on the north side of town is both because the airport is there and there are synergies with the airport, but also because that's the place, the part of town that has the best connection to the regional transportation network and out to the Central Valley along 156 and 152, and also back towards Monterey Bay and the Bay Area to the north through Gilroy. So that's the natural place that industry would want to locate. I do understand that it creates a problem for people living in town that need to commute through town, even to get to a job in town. They're having to go through all of Hollister. But honestly, I think it's, despite that issue, you're going to possibly create more difficulty for yourself if you try and bring industrial or office development to the south side of town, which has fewer connections to the transportation network and will need to compete with that northern end. So I would encourage you to look at something like the mixed use node if you're interested in that. But it's just my advice, and you're the policymakers here, but my advice would be not to designate this land for robust industrial or office uses. And that's why we haven't shown it as an alternative, because we don't think it matches the realities of the marketplace.
Thank you. So in that area you just were highlighting there, that is the mixed use, but could we expand that to the higher density?
Yes, I mean, we do have an option. We have an
Rather
option
than just
for
more
that
single
shows-
family.
Yeah, so we've got this option that shows high density and multifamily, medium density here in these two areas. And this shows low density. You could keep this even in agriculture if you wanted to, so as to preserve a little more agriculture and have these for higher density. Any kind of mixing and matching, I should say, is perfectly appropriate. So this is true on any of the alternatives. You might say, I like the left side of option one and the right side of option two, and we can mix and match them for you in any way you direct us.
Yeah. Again, I just want to be careful of that because of the traffic issues we have in the area. Thank you. Those were my questions.
David, this is David
Yes.
Heboy. I do have one
Yes.
question.
Please.
Given that the vacant land for growth is the higher density and the mixed use within the city limits, if we were to decide to adjust the sphere of influence slightly for based on a moderate to robust growth scenario, let's say we were to expand the sphere of influence for another 69 acres or so, is it possible to have a phasing strategy to prioritize the development for the vacant land within the city limits?
That's a very tricky question. I'll try and answer it. In the old days, meaning like 2 years ago, the short answer would have been yes. And cities such as Turlock is one of the examples that's often pointed to, where they were very successful at prioritizing certain parts of the city versus others for orderly development. Under SB 330, Senate Bill 330 that was passed a couple of years ago, you cannot put any sort of cap or growth control onto land that's already designated. What you can do is designate specific land for, keep it as agriculture, have a plan to later put it in your sphere, but to only do so after further study and after certain triggers. So you might say that we have to have a specific plan and we have to be able to document a certain amount of multifamily development has already happened in other parts of the city, or that the land supply inside the city has shrunk to a certain amount, and that at that point we will consider changing the designations in these other areas, such as you mentioned 69 acres, it could be any number of acres. If you do it that way, it's my belief that it is legal under SB 330 because you haven't committed to a certain course. Once you put the residential designations onto the land, then they're all pretty much equal under the law as the law exists today. And you would have to treat them all equally. But if you've only said, we're willing to study this area in the future, it's not our policy that it will be developed, then you can prioritize development in your existing areas and wait to do additional studies on the areas further out.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee members? All right, then with that, we will open it up for public comment. I want to emphasize once again, oh, then before I do that, let me just mention that Chris Evans has joined us. So I wanted to welcome you, Mr. Evans. I'm glad you're here this evening. I know you entered sometime during my presentation. We do have now a full complement of all 7 GPAC members here this evening, so welcome.
Thank you very much.
I wanted now to open it up for public comment, and I do want to emphasize that this is the only time this evening that there will be public comment on any of the items that I've just presented, and that the commissioners have, committee members have asked questions about. So if you have a comment on any item I spoke about, please do make it now. I believe there are 2 hands raised. Now we have 3. So, one of them is Valerie Eglund, and I'm not clear, Valerie, if you are still had your hand up from last time, or if you do have a comment. But if you do, you would be first, and then we have Rob Rodriguez, and then Pat Saucedo. So, Valerie, if you can unmute yourself and make a comment if you like.
Yes, I did unmute myself, and I had lowered my hand from the previous comment. There are a number of things that I'm looking at that are extremely wonderful in your thinking. And I also have to compliment PlaceWorks as a very reputable company
firm?
to work with. Planning firm. Thank you very much. One thing that struck me right away is the high density development by the railroad. And I feel that that is a development of a slum, and it is totally unfair to high density needed people. When you need a small space to live in, you should not be forced into living by the railroad. There are a lot of young families, startups, couples that need apartments, especially in San Benito County. It is unbelievable the amount of need there is. Maybe not unbelievable, it is predictable. And that we need to provide spaces in San Benito County within Hollister City to have young families, startups, spaces for apartments. And there are significantly, there are some good developments, I should say, significant developments in Hollister that are already existing, that are good examples of how we can accommodate that startup family. But yeah, to put high density next to the railroad, I think would show a community that has no sensitivity to the individual who needs a small living space. So that was
one thing, that bikeways on Wright Road, Buena Vista, excellent. Meridian, Hillcrest, the Little Estates, they're so there already. We need to develop around that, but it's a lovely kind of agricultural area as well. I think that area could very well be a small kind of tiny farm area where you've got young organic farmers who need a little space to get started. I think that would add significantly to the character of Hollister and be in an appropriate area. Moving Meridian Street through over to Hillcrest and Hillcrest. Moving Meridian over to Fairview is also extremely good. That dead end area is nuts. It's been needed. We need to develop that. Otherwise, let's see, industrial commercial out around Tuccio's at Union and 25. That area, it's a strange area because you have a variety of elevations. You've got the fire station. You've got 25 that's moving toward the Pinnacles. This is a really sensitive area where there needs to be a lot of planning go on that makes it work for the city. And you've got a retirement area very near there. You've got the hospital near there. So it's going to require someone very sensitive to move that commercial area together. But I also agree that developing commercial job areas should not. Hollister's a little town. We don't need to worry about how far somebody has to drive within Hollister to get to a job. It's a matter of getting them out onto 25 or 156 to go to a far job. That's a problem. But we need to consider.
I hate to interrupt.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention at the beginning that we are trying to limit comments to 3 minutes, and you've been at
3 minutes.
Somewhat over 4.5 now.
I agree.
So I am going to interrupt.
Waiting. Much appreciated.
So
Much
thank you for your
Thank
comments.
you so much.
I am going to set the timer now for the rest of these. We'll take Mr. Rodriguez next, and I'm going to set the timer for 3 minutes. And Mr. Rodriguez, you can go ahead.
Hey, thank you everyone for giving the public a chance to talk. I kind of have comments on a few things. I think that our sphere of influence looks good how it is. We need major road work. So, from what I understand, the developments haven't been bringing in a lot of money for the roads. So I don't think that we should expand and develop within those areas for city. The wastewater, you said there was 2 districts. You only showed the Sunny Slope one. So, it would have been nice to be able to see the San Benito Water District. I think that was the other one that was mentioned. It would have been nice to be able to see that. On the Buena Vista area, I do like putting some more low density stuff to balance out those neighborhoods. But I would like to see, some kind of protection for the orchards that are still out there. I think it would be cool to have neighborhoods that have orchards still in it. It's part of Hollister's heritage. So I like the idea of Miss Eglin as well, where she said that, space for organic farmers. I think that's a perfect place. I know it's private right now, so it'd be tricky, but that's something that we want to encourage here in Hollister. Meridian, I do like the connection through to Fairview. And I think that it would also be good to have that little red node there in the middle, but no big sprawling gas station, no big signs. Keep it kind of country, like we have the Village Market or we have the Fairview Market, something small like that. Small business. On Union, I think option 6 was good. I think that talking about putting more high density on the north side or the west side of town is not a good idea. I think it would fit well, like I said, to balance out neighborhoods if there was some more high density on that side of town. I agree with the mayor as well, where we need some more commercial space, and why not in that area? There's those big supermarkets just around the corner. I think that it would be good to develop that that way. And I do like the increasing the density limits in downtown. I think that's something that would improve our downtown experience. Be able to have certain communities like artists and young families be able to move into apartments there and live close to downtown. Our downtown is getting a ton of foot traffic lately. It looks beautiful, and I'd love to see it expand positively. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker would be Patricia Saucedo.
Good evening. Pat Saucedo with BIA Bay Area. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I wanted to make a general comment regarding growth management and your process. BIA really encourages the committee, the GPAC, to consider the moderate growth option 3 of about 220 acres and the robust growth option 4 of about 600 acres. We believe that option 3 and 4 will allow future councils to consider some reasonable level of growth should conditions and favorable options present themselves to the city. In the future, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, the bottom line is the council will make the decision whether growth is to occur, a project is to move forward or not. And we believe allowing future councils to have some level of discernible decision-making is going to be very important into the next 20 years for the city of Hollister. We also believe that options 3 and 4 will enable the city to provide a full and balanced spectrum of housing opportunity depending on future market and economic demands over these next 20 or so years, including multifamily rental housing at moderate and higher densities. And you are talking about even higher densities this evening, which will be good for a Hollister. Also multifamily ownership at moderate and higher densities, townhomes, condos, but also still allowing that provision of some level of single family housing. Just beginning to come out of the pandemic, we have seen a huge change in attitude about the opportunity to have housing that accommodates home office, school opportunities, and everything. And so right now, it's really a bit unknown exactly where that market is going to be for many, many people once we are fully out of the pandemic and we see where job demand and where the employees will be able to perform their job duties going forward in the future. So I wanted to say we really encourage the committee to think about these. We encourage these options. We also believe having a full and balanced spectrum of housing going into the future will be a signal to industry that Hollister will be a good city to look at for job creation, because the city is a balanced community that looks for balanced answers to challenging issues. So thank you for this opportunity to speak this evening.
Thank you. That's the last hand that I see raised. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak? I want to emphasize again that this is the only remaining public comment period during this meeting. Valerie Egeland, your hand is still up or up again. We're generally not calling on people for a second time, but is there anything urgent that you have to say, or is it possible that your hand is just up again? It's hard to tell on Zoom. Okay, I think she's lowered her hand again. So, and we did hear from her already. So I think that concludes the public comment period. So with that, I believe that we can bring it back to the GPAC and go through these items again for comment. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen and show, go on with our slideshow. That didn't work. Here we go. So we're going to go through these same items again. We have all the same slides, and I just have to scroll back here to get to them. All right, so the first issue that you are being asked to talk about tonight are the sphere of influence maps. We just heard a number of comments about those. The mayor and others asked some questions about them. I'll just go through them quickly once again. Option 1 is to make no change to the existing sphere, which is shown on the orange color. Option 2 and 3 both look at areas on the south side of town. This one's 69 acres. This one, 220 acres, both in the Union Road area. And I want to mention that, of course, you can direct us to mix and match these. So you could add 69 or 220 acres here, and you could also look at, for instance, doing this, adding additional acreage up in the Buena Vista area, or you could do the Buena Vista area only and not the southern part of town. So any of those would be possible. We do have option 5, which are all the areas considered in the county general plan. That could, of course, even be expanded to go further south in this area where there has been significant development interest in the past. And option 6 is to look at doing what the LAFCO recently thought about studying, which is the corridor along South Side Road. So those are some of the options, and we can open it up now for discussion by the committee. And feel free to ask me to put a certain map up, and I'm happy to do that. Committee members.
David, Mr. Early, if you could, I got a really quick question. I want to make sure we get clarification on this. Just because we do add the sphere of influence does not mean that we have to serve that area until the city is ready to serve it as far as sewer and water. So I want to make sure that's understood and clear. And I think it's important. I think some communities, I think I was told, for example, Santa Clara County will not serve an area that is not annexed into one of these cities, or San Jose or one of them. It will not service anything unless it's annexed in. So I think it's very important that we understand that. We've had this debate over and over again. And I think this would make for better planning as we understand that. But I do want to maybe let some of the other commissioners give their input before I give mine.
Any other committee members like to speak on this?
Okay, well, I'll be happy to go to mine then. If nobody else is speaking. I want to go back to the southern part of the city.
Would this map do for you, or which one would you like to see?
Not that one, no. The next, go on another one to the next one. Go again, next. I'm sorry, go back. One more, okay, right there, there we go. If we can talk about the southern part right now on option 3. If you can expand on that so I can see it a little better, the area.
Boy, I'm in over my head to know how to expand this.
Well, we talked about the mixed use area. That's what I'm trying to get to here, to understand that mixed use area. And
well, the mixed use area is shown better when we get into this. Here we're talking only about actual sphere expansion.
Okay.
Let me, I can, although now I've totally botched this up, but hang on just a moment, I apologize. I can go on to these areas and show you.
Okay.
I think you're looking at perhaps a map sort of like this, one of the ones that shows this area a little larger. This is what we call the Union Road Study Area. And if you all want to give input about land use designations in this area as well, that would be fine.
And that's what I want to do in this area, is look at this as the sphere of influence, the mixed commercial use between just east of Southside Road, south of Enterprise, that whole area, not only that area, but around it up to Southside Road, as more of a mixed use area, higher density in the future. And then west of Southside Road to stay more of the agricultural right now. We could talk about the north side of Union, the potential of some density there, so we can have more of the multifamily. And I'm being careful here because, again, this is a traffic issue in this area. but I think by doing some of the mixed use, we can bring some of the jobs into that area. And, I fully understand that we have a lot of room near the airport, but the goal, at least my goal, is to try to get more people out of their cars and just be able to bike to work or somewhere closer. So those are the areas I would be interested in. I think if we don't do something about this area now, there's been this big push to just build more and more single family homes in that area through the county. I think that's just a big mistake. I think this is a time we should start looking at what we can start planning for the city. So I would say that areas east of Southside Road, south of Enterprise should be a mixed use area. And then to the west, we could talk about agricultural right now in that area, keeping it zoned as agricultural.
So let me, if I could, just to kind of put what the suggestions you made into sort of plannerly language. I think you're suggesting that certainly this area, and I'll go forward on a map because we have another map that shows that. I think you're suggesting that this area, all of it be, we've shown it as high density residential, but you're really saying mixed use, perhaps subject to some future specific plan or master plan for this entire area between Southside and Highway 25, all the way down to Enterprise, and that this would be a mixture of uses that are both commercial, perhaps some job generating uses, and higher density housing.
Yes, sir.
And that would certainly be inside the sphere of influence.
Yes, sir.
And then I think you're also suggesting at least this area south of Union Road in here would be retained as agriculture, and I think would remain outside of the sphere.
That would maintain, yeah, exactly. That would stay agricultural.
Okay. And I was a little less clear about these two areas on either side of the school. At one point I did hear you say development, but at one point I thought you said development, and I thought you said at somewhat higher densities, perhaps medium density, like townhouses.
Higher density, and there's been talk about there's the school there, maybe some housing for teachers and different professions.
So this might be what you and your general plan have called medium density, which is essentially meant to be townhouses, I think.
Exactly right. Yes, sir.
Right.
That would
Okay.
That would cover
So
that.
that's the proposal, and I like where we're headed here. I actually honestly hadn't thought of this until this minute, but at least for this area, you could cover both the sphere expansion and the ideas for this special study area all at once with this one proposal from the mayor, which would expedite the process. So we have, let's just focus here. We have a proposal on the floor from the mayor. It looks somewhat like this map, perhaps a little more like this map. It has, except this brown would be extended all the way out to Southside. This area would be not buff, but medium density, but would be residential development. And then it would be green in here. And I think that means the sphere line here would actually stay as it is today, because that is the existing sphere boundary as shown on this map, runs exactly on these same lines. That's a proposal from the mayor. Are there other members of the committee who would like to speak for or against that proposal?
I have a comment there, is that there's a concern about Union Road, the traffic and the road condition there. And I know that the mixed use, as the mayor was saying, would bring some job creation. I would certainly like to see Union Road improved somewhere down the line. And then to echo what Rob Rodriguez was saying, which I find very important, is that agricultural area south of Union Road, there's some nice orchard areas there that I think is definitely worth preserving it land to agricultural. The mixed use by Enterprise there, right on the over there in that vast area of like over Valley View, where I live in that area, there is that area. It would be nice to have that mixed use. I agree with the mayor there, because large, vast areas of nondescript single-family homes really need some type of a commercial center, a small commercial center, or a small commercial area that would lower the carbon footprint of the sea of homes, single-family homes in that Valley View area. So I agree with those comments, but I just wanted to emphasize the condition of Union Road and also the importance of preserving some of that orchard land that within that agricultural open space area.
Thank you. Commissioner Stevens, did you have some comments?
Yeah, so you were right when you said earlier this is very complicated. And I think that it's because we're having to make decisions on different options that then I believe will impact the other options, and trying to get kind of the right mix of all the various options so that we reach what the overall vision is. It's what makes it so complicated. So my question is sort of around that, and it's to help me to better make a decision about some of these options. So option 3 on the sphere of influence question, does that mean that we would then be looking only at that area that's highlighted for the 220 acres? So that's that's just like, yes, is that my question? I guess the answer would be yes or no. Are we just simply looking at that area that's highlighted for the 220 acres?
Yes, that area is about 220 acres. Now, I need to actually go to Carrie Stone, who's here, and help to prepare some of these maps. Carrie, it seems to me that we have slightly different lines on here, and I don't know if you can look into that, but here this line goes around the northern edge of the Union Road area. But when we go down to the map of the Union Road area, it shows the sphere line going through here, or that's a proposed sphere line, is that
That's
right?
correct.
So that's not
Yes.
the current sphere. Okay, so the current sphere line does go along here. All right. So Commissioner Stevens, in answer to your question, this is about 220 additional acres total here. The proposal from the mayor would be to draw the sphere line along Union Road and then along South Side. So just eyeballing it, I would say that that probably takes this down to maybe 120 acres, and that there's about 100 acres not included in this proposal. So rather than adding a full 220, you'd be adding maybe something like 120 in this vaguely L-shaped area here.
Okay, and then just a comment, just to be like really clear that and I'm trying to visualize this, but I believe where I'm thinking is it was definitely on the north side of Union Road, and it's to the, like, as I'm looking at this map, I believe it's to the left of the light blue area. There is also some orchards there. It might be to the right of it, but anyway, there is also some orchards there that I think need to be preserved. So it's not just simply on the south side of it, but there are some on the north side of the Union Road line. Okay, so with that answer, if we went with option 3 for the 220 acres, then how would we then decide on where the rest of that acreage would come from if we went with the mayor's
Great question. So if you feel you need roughly 200 acres of land added to the sphere, and you don't include this part I'm looking at with my hand right now, you might look in the area around Buena Vista instead, because that's the other area we've been considering. You also could look further south along Southside Road, and you could even look at some of the areas. Let me just go to another map here. I apologize for jumping all around on the maps. But you could even go to some of these other areas that have been looked at by the county for future urban development. And obviously some of those areas are already developed. Santana Ranch is in this area already, but you could look at some of the areas to include Santana Ranch and near Santana Ranch to get some additional land there if you didn't want to do this area or the area up along Buena Vista.
Okay, so then this is one last question. So if we looked at then option 2, which only calls for 69 acres, then that proposed area would be enough, then it sounds like.
Well, I guess it depends what you mean by enough. 69 acres is enough to accommodate the largest amount of growth as long as it's at the highest density. Once you start, and the mayor has been proposing higher densities. So
Yeah,
I think probably given the densities, and we'll come back and double check this before we put it in the general plan itself. We will even be able to double check it before we bring it to you at the Planning Commission. But if you were to direct us, for instance, to designate all of the area here in option 2, and even that L, if you will, in option 3, and if you were to designate it all for higher densities, either through mixed use or townhouses and apartments, my guess is that you'll probably have covered much of the need that you have. You will not have, let me just clarify for the record that you do have a history of building almost exclusively single-family homes over the last few years. You will have created a land supply enough to build all the units that our market demand analysis suggests. I have no way of knowing whether the development community will turn around and start building those higher density units, or, to put it bluntly, if they'll go to a different town that is more receptive of more single-family homes at lower densities and build there instead. I just don't know what will happen.
Yeah.
But I at least hear the mayor saying that he's, I think, more interested in creating the land supply for higher densities. And even if it means it takes some years for the development community to catch up with that, Mr. Mayor, I apologize for putting words in your mouth, but I think you're saying you are willing to wait for the market to catch up, knowing that you have the land supply, knowing that it will ultimately be built with higher densities and with more of mixed-use villages instead of the low density product that's been built so far to date. And I think both the mayor and Commissioner Huboy have said that even if it takes some years, that they'd rather not designate additional land for single family homes.
That's correct.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I mean, I think there's definitely a need out there. So hopefully that will be true. And and then just a little comment that I do think that I would like to see the mixed use designation kept where it is, and maybe even change in other areas to mixed use, only because I like the idea of being able to have like different things in different neighborhoods. So for example, in my neighborhood, I would love to be able to walk to the store if I just needed to grab a quick something, but there's just residents everywhere. And so I always have to get in my car. And I think a lot of the neighborhoods are like that. So it would be nice to designate, even if it's small areas in certain neighborhoods, as mixed use, so that you would allow for some of that. And so I like leaving the mixed use designation in that. Okay, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
So Carrie, Carrie, I'm going to ask you a question in a minute, but let me first just say, I think Commissioner Stevens, you're essentially echoing what we've heard from the mayor and Commissioner Huboy already, is make sure this whole area that I'm pointing to with the cursor is all mixed use. Allow townhouse development north of Union Road. I think you added perhaps to look if there are some orchards still remaining in even north of Union Road that should be maintained as agriculture, and then certainly keep everything south of Union Road in agriculture as well.
Right. I just wanted to be exactly. Yeah, I think all of that, all of that's important. And I just, want to just reiterate the part about the orchards, just making sure that we remember that there are some on the north side of Union as well.
Carrie, can I ask you, do you concur with my guesstimate that this might be about 120 acres, and further with my guesstimate that if that's all redesignated at higher densities than we've shown, that it obviously it's not adding single family land, but it probably adds enough land to match our projections of need, even under the robust development scenario.
Yeah, I agree with that, David.
Okay, good. Yeah. So again, just for the committee, I think if I'm not trying to presage what you might do on the north side of town or anything else, but if you did what the mayor and the two planning commissioners have suggested, you redesignated all of this area that I'm pointing at for the mixed use and higher densities, you would probably have enough land development capacity designated to meet all the projections we've done of even your highest, most robust growth scenario.
David, currently, there are orchards along the whole north side of Union Road, all the way to Airline Highway.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we would want to designate that for residential or commercial if there's working orchards there.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is up to your committee to speak to. I think what Commissioner Stevens was saying was to look for orchards on this side of South Side, and to not to designate those for urbanization. But I think we've heard from three people to designate this whole area, disregarding the orchards. If it's east of South Side, it would all get redesignated. I would say we could write a development policy or guidance that says that a future, say, specific plan in that area should try and preserve some of the character of the orchards, perhaps a few of the trees. That can be very difficult to do because you generally need to do very large scale grading to create appropriate development pads, but it may be possible to preserve a little bit of the character of some of the orchard in here. But I think that generally we either need you to tell us that this whole area is to be designated for urbanization, or tell us not to do that in favor of preserving the orchards.
Question.
The orchards are both on the west and the east side of South Side Road, just north of Union. Is where the orchards, the main orchards they're talking about, are located right next to the school. There is that area, exactly. Those, and on the east side of South Side also there is some orchard right there. So, I think what we're trying to accomplish here is just, they're beautiful orchards too, by the way, and I don't mind them staying. I just want to make sure that we're doing something where this sphere of influence, that we don't end up with more single family homes over here, and then we're making planning decisions for the future, because we ended up with single family homes just south of that area. And I can remember the conversation of, what are you talking about? There's no homes being planned. And a week later, there they were, several hundred homes. So I think it's important that we just
designate it at a time.
Yeah, that's why I want to make sure that we're planning on this, and we're planning for the future of our own community. And again, more of the mixed high density use.
Okay.
I have a question. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I saw that the line crosses over Union, the sphere of influence line, but is there any way that we can bring it back and make Union the line?
Well, that's what we've shown in this diagram that I have here. This is not the existing line, but a proposed line, and it goes along Union, and then it turns down South Side.
Okay.
It's hard to see because of the words, but it's this yellow dashed line, and it currently runs along the red line here, and it would be moved following the little hand cursor. It would go along Union Road, turn down South Side, and turn this way.
Okay.
And
that's fine. I've thought for some reason the red line going over Union into the orchard was the sphere of influence expansion. So I don't want any expansion on the west side. I don't think that we need to. I think we can try to preserve the west side as much as possible. In fact, the west side is like the most developed, fastest growing area in all of Hollister as far as residential development goes, just so you guys know. So I don't want to put any more burden on the west side right now. I like what you guys are saying. If it were up to me, I probably wouldn't expand. If I were to expand, then I would just do this little portion. I think you guys said like 60 acres or something, the bare minimum.
When you point at something, council member, we can't see it. So rather than saying this area, which areas would you?
A slide that you're on with the yellow dash right now. I think that's fine. And then to designate it as high density, I think makes sense.
Would you include this area I'm pointing at also, all the way down to?
Well, if we are, I like your idea of creating a policy to preserve the orchards as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But it does make sense. I hate to say this, but it does make sense to have some type of commercial development right there. It's a major corridor right there on 25 and Union, and it really goes against my my beliefs to kind of encourage any kind of development over an orchard. So if we are going to do that, then I would highly suggest creating a policy or adopting a policy to preserve it as much as possible and pay tribute to the orchards that were there.
Yeah, and it could honestly be a replanting of new trees if they had to be removed first for grading, but you could do something like that.
And I do want to point out, south of Union and east of Southside Road, that orchard was all ripped out already. That was ripped out. And this is why I think it's important to expand the sphere of influence to that area. Otherwise, we will end up with single family homes. Yes, that whole area was all ripped out. That orchard was ripped out a couple of years ago.
So I think I hear a consensus emerging to essentially do what the mayor first said, with the addition of trying to identify any orchards in here to be preserved, but that essentially we would follow this line of development between the green and the color on this map. There would be mixed use in this area. And I do want to note, we'll have to work with staff to define exactly what mixed use means and what the mixtures of uses are. And I think it would probably ultimately be accomplished through a specific plan. And that specific plan would also either preserve the orchards or in some way remember them through new plantings of some orchard-like trees. But this would be a whole mixed-use neighborhood between Airline Highway and Southside Road. And then you'd have townhouses where there's not currently orchard on either side of the school and north of Union Road, with the sphere line running along that edge of what's currently shown in green. Is that a consensus of the group?
Yeah. Hi, this is Chris.
Yeah,
you know, I agree with, you know, with Roland. You know, I'm kind of, you know, sentimental to that area myself, and it's such a beautiful and pristine area right there on Union and 25 that I know commercial stuff is important, but you know, like we said, we need. I would love for us to get away from just putting up walls all over the place and killing our views and what makes, you know, Hollister special. And so I definitely like the idea of keeping, you know, as much green as possible. I would designate the entire south side of Union Road, you know, and that I think we're looking at 3A right now. I would continue that green all the way over there. I know that that orchard's been torn out now, right there on the, you know, I don't know if something can be designated that, some more farmland, some more organic farmland or something like that. But I would like to see maybe that commercial area being in that, you know, north of Union Road there. Yeah, that whole section, instead of the entire area.
That's where the orchard's at now.
Yeah, no. So yeah, what I'm saying is that orchard that you're marking right there, right by the church. Yeah, I can see that being commercial area right there. Like I said, I don't want to see too much commercial area all over the place, and spread out. I like the idea of having local spots that neighborhoods can go to get, you know, little things they need. But I just don't want it to turn into, you know, some more stuff like we have, you know, all over the place in Hollister, where it's just, you know, random, you know, it seems like it's just random hodgepodge put together stuff that, you know, I'd like to, you know, have something concrete or, like Roland said, something there to preserve that area and make it, you know, embrace the land and embrace San Benito County and Hollister and all those good things. I definitely like, you know, the high density there around the school. I think with having all the single family homes, you know, we definitely need, like everybody's saying, I'm totally on board with needing more, you know, more housing for, you know, for people that they can afford. And I think it's a great place to put a combination with the single family homes there around Ladd Lane. You know, it's down the street from the high school as well. And so having some, you know, high density places there, I think is a great idea. I would just preserve more ag land, I think. So that's it. That's my 2 bits.
Well, so I'm having less of a sense of a consensus now. It sounds like there's still a consensus that this area on north of Union and west of Southside at least where there are not orchards today, is an appropriate area for townhouse type residential development. And it sounds like there's also a consensus that south of Union Road and west of South Side should definitely remain agriculture. I'm less clear if you all have a consensus here. I think I also hear a consensus that there can and should be some sort of mixed use node out here at Union and Airline Highway. This particular node as shown here is actually quite large. I'm trying to see if I make sure I can remember the scale here. I think this is like 500 or 600 feet if I'm remembering correctly. I can't quite see it on the scale. Carrie, I don't know if you can tell us how big that node is offhand, but I think it's pretty large.
Well, it looks like it ends right when you come down the hill there on Union.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard some committee members say that it should be a limited node really out at the highway. Some have said do the whole area. Some have said only do the south side, the southern side of Union because the orchard's gone. And some have said keep the southern side in ag because it's farther out of town, but do the northern side. So there's 4 different opinions about the extent of new mixed-use development in here. I think we all agreed there should be some mixed-use development in this area, but I'm not sure how big it should be or whether it should be north or south of Union Road, given the presence of the orchard on the south, on the north.
This isn't, Parks is another meeting, but this seems like it'd be a great place for some sort of parks and recreation area as well.
I think going back to this area here, there's a push there for more single family homes. And I think it's important for us to start planning the future here. That makes more sense for our community. That's why we're talking about a higher density mixed use. So again, there could be some retail, there could be some office space. And this is a very good positive area because you have the high school nearby, you have Lad Lane nearby, you actually have Sarah Vista nearby, 3 different schools and Sunny Slope. So this is an area where if people are more multi-family, they could actually, they don't want to take their car, they could actually ride their bikes in a safe manner to get to their destination. So this is why this is so important. If we just allow this to keep going the way it is, those will become single family homes in that whole area. And then we're really going to have a problem in the future. So I think we've recognized that 80% of our community is single family homes now. It's time to start making that change towards the higher density. And this does give it that mix of, again, mixed use. Hopefully the orchards will be there for a while. And if we want to designate the existing orchard to try to preserve it, I think we probably could, but I just think it's important to recognize this area as a very important area for the future of this community. Otherwise, we're going to have, again, just single family homes throughout the whole area.
Do we have like a percentage that we're shooting for over the next 20 years of, I know we want we all agree we want high density. But is there, there's going to be some single family homes being built, right? I mean, what percentage?
I don't think I can emphasize enough that you're going to see a lot of, this is not what I meant to emphasize, but you are going to see a lot of single family homes built because there's what we call a pipeline of units that have been approved, and they're sprinkled both throughout town and around the edges of town. But you have essentially zero land left in the city that's not already approved for new single family development. So you will see, unless you change the general plan, you will see essentially zero new applications for single family homes. There just is not land left for them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so in answer to your question, the target that seems to be emerging is that you are targeting beyond what's already approved, almost zero new single family homes, and only seeing applications from those developers who do think that Hollister is the right place for townhouses and apartments and mixed use development and downtown development. Those are the new applications you'll see.
Can you just slide over to option 1 then? Is that where there is no change? This is what's going down?
Well, yeah, and what's kind of strange about that is that the current city general plan doesn't even designate this area at all. So we wouldn't recommend that you do option 1. Option 1, if you change this to ag, becomes exactly option 3A. Those are the same. So option 1, I would not recommend because you're essentially saying nothing about this area, and I don't think that's in your interests.
Mr. Early, if I can.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to be very clear. I don't want any more single family homes either. And I think we should designate both those areas on the north and south side of Union up close to the mixed use as, I guess, high density or mixed use. I'm fine with either one.
Right.
And I want to protect it from getting more single family homes. So I don't know if my comments, I'm not sure if I was clear or not about that. But
no, I think you were,
Council
Councilmember. I think that just to keep score, so to speak, I think we heard from you, from the mayor, and from Commissioner Stevens that this would be a mixed-use area, subject to a specific plan and with a mixture of uses to be worked out later, but all of it to be developed. And then I think we heard both from Member Johnson as well as Member Evans that they might prefer to see some retention of some of the ag in this area. So if it were to be a vote, I think it would right now probably be 4-2. I think that both commissioners and both council members have spoken in favor of this area being all developed in the future with some controls, with as much retention of the agricultural character as possible, but still understanding that it would all be developed with as a mixed use node. I think the 2 at-large members who've spoken were more in favor of some preservation in this area also. And I think, given that it is kind of 4-2, and I know, time is ticking and we should look at other subjects, I might suggest that that does seem to be the will of the majority, unless any of you want to talk about it further.
I would agree to go ahead and go with Mayor Velasquez's decision also. I believe right now currently that portion of land that's on the corner of Union and Airline Highway, the north side, is commercial right now anyway. Well, it's a working farm and they have commercial in there. They have a store. So you're not really going to be changing too much there by allowing more mixed use in there.
Well, to be clear, mixed use in our parlance means a much denser set of developments that would probably remove all of the agriculture. It would all be developed and with houses and stores, shopping centers, small retail stores and so forth. It would be much more than the farm with the farm stand.
Right. I could see that more on the north side than I could on the south side. I know the south side is a bigger piece of land, just because of the way the geography is of that parcel. But I mean, at this point, we do need to get it designated in order to protect it. So
it sounds like we've got kind of a consensus now to do what the mayor did suggest at the outset. And I do think, we'll try and write some policy about that future specific plan, about a real mixture of uses, about maintaining some of the agricultural area, perhaps some of this area that's a little higher up or that has orchard on it may be preserved a little bit, but overall that this would be a development area. And so I think for time's sake, we should probably move on. And let me then go back and ask about, I think, the obvious area to talk about next is this Buena Vista area, and I'll go to the current general plan designations. I don't think you have to even maintain this much development potential in this northern area, given what you've now directed us to do in the southern area. But the way the general plan looks today is along this line, which doesn't really have a name, it's not an existing road, but you would have a potential, you'd have agricultural preserved on the northern half and low density residential on the southern half. I did hear the mayor and Councilmember Resendez say they really don't want to see a lot more single family. Perhaps you would either redesignate a portion of this area for agriculture, as in this option number 2, or perhaps you would designate it for a higher density of development, as you've shown in this scheme here. But and then you could keep the northern area along Wright Road, just south of Wright Road, in agriculture. So comments or thoughts about that?
I think this area has been impacted, and as Mr. representatives pointed out, a lot of growth is happening there. I like the going back to option 2, more preserve of the that's prime ag land down there, and I think it's been a shame to lose some of that. Some of the biggest orchards are down there in that area, and again, prime ag land. So I like the option 2 area plan.
I agree.
Other comments there?
I like the option 2, but I'm wondering about those roads. Can we include those roads and do option 2?
Well,
Will it?
you can do anything you'd like, of course, but I think if you're going to not plan to annex this land and you're not going to see it developed, I would ask what the benefit is of those roads, and even more so, I would ask how they would be paid for if there's no development to pay for them.
Good. Thank you for pointing that out. Sorry about that.
So I think if you do this scheme with all green here, we certainly could extend Buena Vista itself to get out to 156 without having the sharp curve that it has today. That's shown here. That's an option to consider, and is meant to be part of this option 2. We could also, I mean, parts of Buena Vista have been just recently worked on, I believe, but we could try and see about the possibility of some sort of greenway and buffer along Buena Vista to create a northern edge to the city here, maybe even some sort of buffer along this edge where you have the edges of future development with a roadway in here. We could come back and study that some, but I don't think you'd put the road up here through the middle of the.
I was confused. I thought that was Buena Vista. So that's an imaginary line.
This is it's a real line between parcels. But this is
Buena Vista. Okay. So the orange is designated medium density.
Yeah, and that's in your general plan today.
Okay, and that's fine. If I could, I'd even take that out, but that's fine.
You can do just about anything. I mean, you don't have to. When you start taking out the medium density land, we come back to the question that under state law today, you cannot lessen the overall capacity of the general plan. You've just added a lot at the south side of town. We'd have to come back and possibly make some additional changes in here, or possibly keep a little bit of this, or possibly look at further south. You do have an existing public facility here. Perhaps you do keep one small part of this, but you could redesignate this area that I'm pointing at as green, in addition to your idea to, so you could not only put the green here for agriculture, but you could take some of this in as well if that's what you want.
Yeah, the problem is they've already got some projects approved in those parcels, like a couple of them. So it makes sense. It makes sense, unfortunately, to go ahead and build it out. And I think medium density would be a good compromise, or even medium and high, I don't know if you can make that happen.
Yeah, we can go back. I'm sorry, I keep inadvertently changing the slide. We can certainly go back after this meeting and try and find appropriate locations for higher density as well, if you would like us to do that.
Yeah, if we can get some more higher density then.
Okay. All right, are there other committee members? I think we have a proposal on the floor that we would essentially do this option number 2, making all of this area ag, and looking perhaps in here if there are any parcels that, particularly if they're further west here, that they might go into ag also, but also anywhere that is already proposed and approved would stay as it is. And if there's lots left in between here that could get a higher density, we'll put that higher density designation on as well. Is that both what those who have spoken meant, and is that acceptable to the rest of you?
Absolutely, on my side.
Yeah, I agree that I agree with changing the density to high. I like that. And yeah, I'm okay with option 2.
I think the important thing is, in my view, is to extend Buena Vista to 156. I think that has to be done.
This piece over here is very important.
Yeah.
I agree.
Getting the traffic on that artery. And the agricultural land, certainly in the Wright Road, south of Wright Road, I think that needs to remain. agricultural land designation. I am receptive to some low density in that area, but I'm on the fence on that. I could go either way with ag or low density to the southern portion.
Well, Commissioner Huber, I think we've heard from several other committee members that they prefer what we see here in terms of not having that. So if that's acceptable.
I'll go along with that.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, I agree with option 2.
Can we just get a quick little look at those other ones real quick again?
Sure. So option 3 would have kept essentially what's in the general plan today with additional roadways put through to serve it. And on what we've called an imaginary line that's between Buena Vista and Wright, there would be a new roadway built to both provide access and create a buffer with the greenway. And then the next one is to develop the entire area out to Wright Road with, in this case, single family homes, and option 5 has higher densities all the way out to Wright Road. And it sounds like, Chris, most of the committee feels like they don't want to see that level of development in the area.
Yeah, I agree. I'm looking at 2, but then I also, like I said, I kind of agree with David that, I don't mind seeing, some low density in that area either. Obviously more high, more medium, but I don't know if we could have a mix or something, but it seems kind of a shame to, not have that option for some possible low density.
Well, do some of you want to look at, I think
maybe, Mr. Early, maybe to make it clear, there are hundreds of homes right now being built, single family homes being built in that area, single family. So
it's the highest developing area in all of Hollister.
Yeah, just north of
and that extends all the way to 156. Is that what we're talking about?
No.
That's not, out to 156 is currently not developed and would not become developable under this scheme. I don't think, staff maybe can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's currently any projects pending.
So like option 1, option 1 is what's going on right now, what's happening, right?
Option 1 is how the general plan designates it today. Yes.
Yeah, I agree with everybody. That's a little bit too much, that's too much low density, I think, for obviously what we got. And I will obviously want to see more ag land preserved. But extending that strip of Buena Vista, I totally agree with, all the way to 156. But like I said, I'm kind of on the outskirts here with Dave about not minding some low density maybe in that area, along that area, if that line kind of there was extended where yep, exactly that what you're circling there. But if everybody's the consensus is keep it as is, then, or option 2, I'm fine with that.
Abraham, if you're on the line, does the county have any low density projects that are in the pipeline for that area? Do you know?
I know in the county, not that I know of in that particular area, Councilmember Resendez. I know, like you mentioned earlier, there is recently property was annexed into the city of Hollister, right across the street from Calvary School. I believe it was around 9 acres plus 10 acres, medium density residential, and there's going to potentially be a proposal for an additional, I believe it's 80, 90 small lot single family homes there. So that's potentially in the pipeline.
Abraham, that's somewhere right in here, is that right?
Yeah, just a little bit to the west, that longer lot, that one right there. Yes, correct. And so, but other than that, in the county, I don't recall any other projects in that area for single family home.
Okay. Yeah, so I just want to share my perspective as a councilman that represents this area. This is the biggest area that I get complaints of is Buena Vista. The congestion, the not so safe paths to school, and the speeding. The speeding is crazy out there. So we do have some things coming along that's going to help us look at mediating some traffic calming solutions for that area. And I guess it does make sense to have a little bit more medium if we're going up, but I really don't think we should add. I really like this here, preserve it as much as possible. We need to really get our infrastructure balanced out in that area, and I really would be opposed to or hesitant to want to add any more. Thank you.
Okay, so I think I think we've got mostly consensus here. We've got a little disagreement, but I think even on the areas of disagreement, we've got a kind of clear majority. I think that the areas of agreement are that almost all of this will be maintained as agriculture, and this portion that is currently designated for low density residential will go back to agriculture. We have agreement that this area will be at least medium density, and if we can find appropriate places for high density, particularly pockets between future already proposed developments, we'll redesignate them for higher. I think we also had agreement, well, and then where we did not have agreement was the possibility in this area, whether it should be even more agricultural by picking up some of these parcels that I'm pointing at now and making them agricultural if they don't have development on them yet, versus even allowing some lower density residential to buff color throughout this zone, even into this green area. But I think that the majority will seems to be to err on the side of keeping the green that's on this map as green and keeping these in the higher density and not letting them go lower either.
That would be my view.
Same.
And I think I heard that from Member Johnson as well, and perhaps Commissioner Huboy also. Is that right?
I concur.
Yes.
All right. So again, in the name of time, I think we should go on. And I'd like to just summarize where I think we are. I think we've actually now dealt with the sphere options. I think you've essentially given us comment that you do want us to, we're going to be expanding the sphere in the southern area only. And I'm telling you, I'm pretty sure that with the densities you've proposed there, that that's going to be enough to accommodate any of the growth projections as long as we assume that it's all in higher densities. And that means you don't need to be expanding the sphere in other areas of the city. And so you've actually now covered the sphere and you've covered 2 of the 3 special study areas. It's been a sort of a meandering discussion and it's gone on several different subjects, but we've actually covered a lot. And we have about a half an hour left and I want to try and pick up the remaining items. And so the next item would be these issues about wastewater service. And the questions at hand are, firstly, if you do want to incorporate into the general plan policies that follow state law to clarify that the city would only provide wastewater treatment service inside the SOI in areas that are planned for expansion, for annexation, and whether you want to have a general plan policy to provide sewer service outside the sphere only if there's a threat to public health and safety. And these would be, you don't necessarily need these because they are already subject to state law, but at the same time, it might be useful to have them in your general plan just to avoid the kind of confusion that appears to have happened over the past decade or so. So any questions or comments about having such policies in the general plan?
And Mr. Early, I would like to speak on this. I think actually we need to go a step further and just be clear that we will only provide services for land that is annexed into the city. This has been, again, an ongoing problem and a lot of different excuses made to accept it, and definitely have been on that line of what probably is not legal. And I think it's going to be important for the city to have that as part of their policy, that only in areas that is annexed to the city. Of course, as you point out, something in an emergency case, that'd be a different story.
Right. And the service to San Juan Bautista, actually, just to be clear, that would qualify because the city of San Juan Bautista is under a state order to resolve their wastewater problems, which it is a problem of public health and safety. And so that would be within this.
And also because they are an incorporated city.
Right. But so Mr. Mayor, you're proposing that the policy actually, and this is fine to do, just to say for the record, it would be going beyond what state law requires, and simply to say very clearly that the city will not extend sewer service to any area outside of an incorporated city, whether it's the city of Hollister or inside the city of San Juan Bautista.
Correct.
Other comments on that proposal?
Well, I think one thing for certain is that the MOUs of 2008, 2016 we need to bring those back and revisit those MOUs, because I think they just create confusion in regard to the government code section 56133. If we agree with keeping the service within the city limits or within the sphere of influence, one thing for certain is that those MOUs need to be updated.
Right. Thank you for that. Yeah, that is on the next slide here, and I think that you can take these hand in hand. It does make sense if you were to do what the mayor said here and have a policy that you're only going to extend sewer service inside city limits, then you're obviously going to also want to exit those MOUs.
Mr. Early. Yeah, I'm in favor of exiting them. I heard you say that that was an option, and I'll be honest, I didn't know that that was an option. I can't tell you how many times I sit up there and I hear people say, well, it's in the sphere of influence. You got to provide water and sewer service. And the mayor's always saying, no, we don't.
Right.
And,
the more important of the two MOUs is the one from 2016, and it actually has an expiration date, which is a 5-year life. It ends in I guess it ends in this year. And you have the right to exit it either by not renewing it at the time it expires, which if I'm recalling correctly is this August, or you can exit with, and I think then it's a 1-year exit period, but you can also exit it at any time with, I believe, 3 months notice. So we can get you that exact information, but yes, it actually has 2 different clauses, one to non-renew it and a second one to leave it.
Well, I agree with Commissioner Huboy that it creates some type of confusion. Why even have it? If we're going to create policy and if we're going to have state laws to back that up, I say we just go by that and we either exit the MOU early or we just don't renew it.
Okay. And do either of you, Commissioner Huboy or Councilmember Resendes or others, want to comment on the mayor's proposal to go further than this slide shows and actually create a policy that says no extension of sewer service outside of city limits?
100%. I agree with that.
You know, I go along with the mayor on that. I mean, knowing that we've invested $100 million in our wastewater treatment plant, and it's been documented that it's going to need some improvements down the line. So I think we have to be very careful about this.
All right. So on that note, it may be that if with the mayor's concurrence and the others, I do want to, I think, check with city staff that that's not going to put the city in a bad financial situation in terms of paying off the plant and having funds to pay for needed expansions in the future that are not to serve future development, but just to ensure adequate functioning now. But I think my vague understanding is that that can be done financially and that it will be financially workable to not extend further. And so with that caveat that we check that with staff, and I would like to hear from any of the other 4 committee members, but it sounds like we have at least 3 committee members that, provided it works financially, they would want to see us just have a policy that there won't be city sewer services expended outside of city limits.
Mr. Early, I could address the as far as the financial picture, because I've been involved with trying to pay down the debt, the bonds of that sewer, because I inherited that big monster over $100 million, which is down now to about 60 million. And absolutely, it works for the city to do it this way. But more importantly, what the reason for this, it prevents more islands from happening around us. And that's been the biggest problem in our communities, county islands within the city. And this just really needs to come to a stop.
What would prevent developers from annexing into the city limits prior to submitting their plans, their development plans?
Right, that could still happen. It's my understanding, and I actually have been meaning to verify this, but I'm 90% sure that you will only annex if you want to annex. I don't think you can be forced to annex new development land.
Okay.
But it is true that if the city desired to annex and did annex, then you could extend, under the mayor's proposed policy, then you could extend sewer service to those annexed lands.
I agree with the mayor. We do have far too many islands in this city that should be annexed in. And I know we can't make them annex, but, and if something happens to their property where they lose their septic or whatever, we have to provide service to them. So I would go ahead and agree with what the mayor has said.
Okay. Any other comments on that before we move on? All right, we've got about 15 minutes left. We've got a fair number of items to take care of. I might suggest that we get through this one and maybe one more, and then Carrie and city staff, next time we're only doing arts and culture. It may be that we just pick up one or two items at next time's meeting, because I think we'll have adequate time on the schedule next week, instead of trying to plow through all of this tonight. We have gotten quite a bit done, but perhaps we do this one and talk about the Meridian area and then talk about the residential issues next week. So let me, having put that out there, we'll come back to that in a few minutes. Let me ask on this item that's on the screen now, would you like to see a policy? This is not, you don't necessarily need a policy about this in the general plan at all, but there have been suggestions from various quarters, including LAFCO, that the right thing to do for the city would be to put the wastewater treatment plant under joint operation. You can have no policy about this, or you could create a policy either that you do or do not want to allow for joint operation of the wastewater treatment plant. Any thoughts on that?
So Mr. Early, I'll speak to this again because this has been a conversation that's been happening lately with different groups wanting to access our plant to provide services to areas outside of the city. And the answer is going to be absolutely not. This is a plant the city had to spend over $100 million to build. At the time, they were looking for partners to work on this together. That did not materialize. And now that more than half of the plant is paid off, there's people asking to now be partners in this. And the city carried this burden for a long time, and the cities will not likely give up an asset this size to for JPA. So I think the city wants to make sure that we are looking at controlling growth in the best possible way and servicing those that are within the city limits.
And so, Mr. Mayor, if I hear you saying you would definitely not want a general plan policy saying you do want to explore joint operation.
No.
My personal opinion would be you do not need a policy that says that you will not explore joint operation.
Right. We don't need a policy. It's
so
already.
You would just have no policy at all on this subject.
Yeah.
Is that agreeable to the rest of the committee?
I agree with that. It's $100 million investment that the city of Hollister made. I don't see why I don't see the advantage of having a joint powers authority or going into some type of development agreement, some type of an agreement to control the plant. I just don't see the advantage of it.
All right, any other committee comments on that?
Agree.
I agree.
I agree.
Right. I think we've heard from a majority of the committee on that regard. I kind of apologize. It's funny to do this meeting via Zoom and not see people's faces and all. I know some of you haven't gotten to speak as much, but I assume that your non-speaking is concurrence with what the speakers are saying. So what I'd like to suggest is that we do try and do one more item. We did 2 of the 3 special planning areas. Let me just go back to this master map. We talked both about the Buena Vista area as well as Union Road. I'd like to quickly look at Meridian, and then I think we would end the meeting tonight and we'll come back and pick up the residential items because I think they will take between 15 and 30 minutes. It's getting late tonight. I think we could combine them into next time's agenda. So let's just look quickly at Meridian. And we've created several options. These are the existing land use designations today. As you all know, Meridian Street does dead end and then picks up again where to get out to Fairview, but it does not continue through this area that's sort of on the line of Prater Way. We have a proposal to keep the general plan designations as they are, but put both Meridian and Prater through with a new, this does require a new bridge crossing over the existing creek. We also have a proposal to actually lessen the designations in some of the areas, so as I think it was Carol Johnson who spoke about this being today kind of a low intensity agricultural area, small lots, but people doing some forms of farming in that area. And so it would be possible to redesignate some of these areas so that they're not subject to new development proposals. And we may even be able to pick up a couple others of those if you want us to with that residential estate designation. And that's our third option. Those are the only three options we have. And so I'm wondering if any of you have ideas about this area.
Can Dave, can you show us number 2 again?
There it is.
That red dot, that's the little commercial center, correct? Yeah. In the center.
Yeah, that's a potential commercial node, exactly.
That's
Small,
the one
sort
of the options. That's the one I was leaning towards.
Yeah, I agree with Dave. I know growing up in Ridgemark, you know, I've been waiting to see this area developed for well, I didn't want to see it developed, but I knew it was going to be developed. And so I think having it connect all the way through is you know, the best option.
All right, is that, so that, I think a couple people saying this doesn't seem like the option to pursue?
I don't, you know, I know this area pretty well. I've been going back and forth in this area. The existing area just west of Fairview are, what'd you say? You called it estate lots? I don't know.
Yeah, your general plan calls it residential estate.
Yeah, I don't know if it makes much sense to punch through that area now from the existing Meridian. I think if in the future Prater Street goes through to Hillcrest, I would kind of take that to the existing Meridian. That would make a little more sense.
You just come down this way and here without doing this piece over the creek.
Well, it's the portion west or east of that mark. I'm wondering, I don't see that existing neighborhood really fitting in with some of these other developments that are going to come in the future. Those again are more of the estate lots, quite large lots on there. I think this is more of a going back to what we're looking at for the future in that area there, higher density or what's going to go on before we can get a better idea of what should be going on with the connections there.
Well, let me just say by way of explanation, it's hard to, what happens in development is that when lots get small enough, even though they're still pretty big, developers cannot assemble them for newer single family development. So certainly in this area, let me point here first. This is an area that's already developed at a density that even though it's relatively low, these are probably 1 acre lots or so, you're not going to see them amalgamated for a suburban subdivision. This lot or these lots are big enough that they probably would be. And so you might get a pattern, if you see this is a typical single family subdivision that I'm pointing at down here or over here where I'm pointing. This area will probably not become that because it's just not possible to assemble all those lots. This site, if you keep this designation on this site, you'll probably get this pattern at some point in the relatively near future. This is probably middle ground. It's hard to know if someone might assemble these. It's possible that each individual owner would subdivide them into 6 or 8 lots, which could create both an opportunity for those owners, but also not a very efficient pattern because of the lot line pattern here. So if you do want to see this kind of pattern, the kind of standard single family pattern in this area, then you would keep these designations as they are. If you want to keep it as it is with these quite large lots, you would probably do something more like this pattern here and perhaps even put this lighter residential estate color even onto some of these lots or some of these to keep them in a larger size, or so that they don't get to be any smaller lot than say these over here today.
And I would, I'd like to see the smaller or more affordable, but I think in this area, because of how the development has taken place in the past of the larger lots, I think you're going to keep that consistency. But I would probably just take Prater to Santa Ana or to Hillcrest and not cross over into Meridian. Meridian there on the west side of that area is pretty tight as it is. It's going through some neighborhoods that have apartment complexes and a lot of cars lined up parked along the street. So I would probably not punch. I probably would not punch through Meridian through that area. I would just use Prater as a way to get to Santa Ana or to Hillcrest.
Okay, so I think you're proposing that we, I'm sorry, wrong map. You would like to see the roadway network showing Prater going through and only this piece, but not this piece.
Correct.
And I think you're saying, I'm not sure if you're saying to change any general plan designations or just leave them as they are today as shown on this drawing.
That is the designation, low density residential. I was thinking more of the, as you point out, the estate lots.
So you would like us to go back and study this and probably redesignate at least some of these sites as shown here for the estate residential.
I think that would probably make sense judging by what's been built out there already.
Yeah. So it would be this pattern on land use, perhaps even more of the buff color, coupled with a roadway pattern that's this line and this line only.
Correct.
Well, I agree with the mayor about that area and staying, keeping that flexibility to have, the estates. But I really think the road going through, both ways, Meridian all the way through and Prater as well, is the best option for the next 20 years. It's, eventually that area is going to need to be, eventually need to be done. And I think planning for it now is the most important thing.
Yeah, and normally I would agree with you. It's just such a tight Meridian right there where it dead ends. It's such a tight area with so many cars parked out on the street now. It's just going to be a high traffic area. So that's the only reason I'm saying that. And I really don't have the right answer as far as the roadways at this point, but I just know at the inner Meridian it's pretty congested in that area, and there's a lot of people speeding in that area as it is, even though it's a dead end.
All right, so is that, sounded like the mayor's made a proposal and Member Evans concurred. Are there other comments?
I think I would lean towards option 2 and just leaving it as is. I mean, I agree with some of the comments of the mayor, but I would like to just see it going through. I'm wondering if opening that up might alleviate some of the parking issues. I don't know, but I would like to see it just like going all the way through the way that it is on the map right now.
As shown here, and Commissioner Stevens, would you also keep the designations to allow this pattern that I'm pointing at to be replicated on some of these lots?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a pretty different suggestion than the mayor's. Do others want to comment one way or the other on either what Commissioner Stevens has suggested?
Maybe I can add to this a little bit more, and maybe Abraham could help me. Maybe Mr. Huboy would know too. I believe there was a owner that one of those properties that was wanting to build estate lots. If I'm correct, I believe in that area, and that's kind of why I think that was already in the works. Maybe Abraham can answer that.
Mary, yes, if I may, there is an area that's a lot that is within the sphere of influence, and the owner wanted to build larger half-acre lots. but they wanted city services, and you know, we basically, our recommendation was that they really should annex if they were within the sphere of influence.
I'm sorry, Abraham, can you speak up a little bit, please?
Yes. So what I was saying is that there was a proposal in the county for a property that's within the city's sphere of influence to annex, not to annex, but to develop half-acre lots, similar to a residential estate that the mayor was alluding to. But the city's recommendation was that really it should annex. The property should annex, but the mayor's right. There was a proposal already in place for half-acre lots with the county.
All right, so I think there are two proposals on the table. One is to do what you see on this drawing. That was from Commissioner Stevens. It would be to keep the designations as they are, which does allow for this sort of standard single-family development on some of these larger lots, and with the addition of the two new streets. The other proposal from the mayor, which was to do only the Prater extension and this little piece of Meridian, not building the bridge, and also to do the kind of redesignation of some of the properties to maintain more residential estate and not allow for so much of the smaller single-family development lots. So two proposals on the table.
I do like the idea of the residential estates, and I do like the idea of punching through on both those roads. So I don't know.
You're
If
doing a
any-
third
Yeah, that's exactly what Roland is saying is what I was saying as well. I agree with what he just said, punching through both roads and saving, you know, the option 3, what you have right there as far as those estates.
Okay, so it's 1 to 1 to 2 at this point.
I agree. I think Commissioner Stevens made a good point. And I know the mayor's concerns are valid there with the congestion of cars, but I actually think by extending Meridian, I believe that might alleviate that situation of congestion. So I will go along with what Chris was saying. And
so Commissioner Huboy, I hear you saying you want both roads.
yeah.
Are you wanting to leave the designations as is, as Commissioner Stevens suggested, or are you wanting to go with the rural residential estate as Councilmember Resendez just suggested?
I'll go along with taking the roads all the way through and go along with what Roland was saying with keeping the estates.
So that's the vote now, so to speak, is 1 to 1 to 3. Do we want to?
I'm okay with doing that too. I mean, I think I'm okay with doing that too, changing the designation. I mean, if the rest, it seems like the rest of or a lot of the GPAC members want to do that, so I'm okay with doing that.
Okay, so we'll lower the densities as shown here, and I want to go back and study. There may even be a few other lots on which we could do that to maintain the character out there. It'll be that pattern of color with, with that pattern of roads.
I'm torn between keeping the road the way that you have it shown now and possibly realigning it someplace else and punching it out to Fairview so that it's not disturbing the existing Meridian Street.
Oh, this piece here. So you might, for instance, rather see it go this way.
Exactly.
To avoid this neighborhood.
Yes.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah, because right now the people who live on Meridian Street in that area, I have a friend who lives out there. You know, it's a pretty quiet area. And, you know, it to me, that would kind of destroy the feel of,
that's an interesting point.
If that
so then this piece of Meridian might even be renamed. It really, this Meridian would go some other way. And this piece would become a cul-de-sac that really is never intended to go further.
Or it could go out to Prater and then up, but I don't know, you know, that it would, I'm a little torn about that. I would like to keep the residential estate designation in more of the areas there, because I think that would be a nice, you know, add to what the feel of that community is already. But yeah, I'm not sure I would want that road to go
Right.
through the current Meridian Street right now. Maybe another option.
If I
Well,
could
I'll be
add-
honest and say, I haven't thought of what you just suggested, Member Johnson, and I can imagine that the folks living on this piece of Meridian would like to keep it as a cul-de-sac, so to speak. And I
Yeah,
think it is in keeping with what all of you, most of you are now saying, you do want to preserve this residential estate character in this area, and
mhm,
having this residential estate area without through roads in it is probably more in keeping with that concept.
yeah,
Or at the very least, making some sort of dog leg here or something so that people wouldn't be inclined to just sort of speed through the area
that's
all the way out
exactly
to
what's
Fairview.
going to happen. Yeah, that's what's going to happen.
If I can add to her comments, I think she's absolutely right. And, you know, if you're going to have the estate lots, I don't think it's going to be an issue as far as coming into the existing Meridian from Fairview. I think that would work. The problem becomes on the west side of the Meridian. And one more piece to that, it's much more expensive to build that road over a creek with that bridge than it is to have the developers take care of the other part of it. So it adds a considerable amount of money, and it does create a situation where now people are speeding through from one end of Fairview to the other. The only issue about not using the existing Meridian in another street would be that would be another intersection on Fairview, another inlet or outlet, and that would cause additional problems. So you'd want to use the existing Meridian, but I think those residents would be okay if the rest of the neighborhood is, again, the state lots. That's why, you know, usually I'd want to see a higher density, but this area has already been built out this way.
Right.
Compared to that neighborhood,
Right.
that would keep the traffic from being out of hand, out of control. And really somebody going west is going to try to get to Santa Ana Road or Hillcrest before they want to use Meridian. Meridian would just be another, like not a shortcut, but a way to race through the town there. And we want to make sure we're not creating high-speed traffic through there.
So let me suggest that we take that comment very seriously. And I think what I'm hearing is we would still show these streets going through, but narrower, very local, with what I'm calling a dog leg or a jog in here somewhere so that they wouldn't be through streets. Maybe something to slow traffic if there were some small commercial node or something in this area, and really trying to make it so that it's not something that people would use for through traffic in this area and would instead only be to serve this area.
Would a roundabout help in any way?
A roundabout would probably be part of slowing that. Yeah, that could be.
That is going to be part of the city policy now, is roundabouts on some of these newer developments.
Yeah, the technical term, as I understand it, is there's a difference between a roundabout and a traffic circle. And I think here we're really talking about more of a traffic circle. Roundabouts are intended to move more traffic through more quickly, whereas a traffic circle is intended to slow the speed of traffic and make the street even more local than it might have been otherwise. So I think this would technically be a traffic circle, but I think we all know what we're talking about.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep, perfect.
Okay, I think we have good direction on that. Member Johnson, I really want to thank you for pointing that out. Like I said, I hadn't thought of that already. And I think we should stop there. It's now 8:36, so we're a little over time. I do think we'll have plenty of time next time. We did get through all of the special study areas as well. We will be looking at the high density residential, both the 20 unit per acre density minimum, as well as the increases in high density in downtown. And then this very detailed question about net versus gross density. We'll try and do that next time at the beginning of the meeting, and then we'll go on to the arts and culture portion of the meeting as well. Does any committee members have any final comments or thoughts before we close for the evening? I'm hearing none. Mr. Mayor, do you want to formally close the meeting and adjourn us?
I will. I do want to. I want to thank again all the community members. I am so impressed with all of you and how we are working together to build a better community. Just beyond what I could ever imagine. And again, staff, thank you, Mr. Early, and your firm. Absolutely the best choice we could have made. So with that, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
I second.
All right, that was a quick draw there. So who's going to call it? I think
gonna
Mr.
ta-
Johnson-
I'm gonna
I think
take
Mr.
that one. I was
Johnson
pretty
got
quick
you,
on it.
Mr. Evans.
I was pretty quick on it. I'm gonna take it.
Oh, you're going to take it. Okay. There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all so much. And
Good
good
night,
night.
See you all
everyone.
next
See you
week.
next week.
Okay.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you very much.